and not what I'll ever be. I'm not interested in any way being attached and being known that I'm attached to the people who bore me or raised me. I am so different from them. I am so beyond them. I got no interest in any way affiliating with them. Very interesting question. And finally, this final question. Do you think it's true that you should be very careful to not be too attached to the things you care the most about because you could lose them? Is that a fair way to think about the things that matter in your life? Let's jump to 2b and the rhetorical work really quickly. Of course, we've already pointed it out. Notice that this is a poem that is like an elegy, that is going to be a sad statement. Notice it is a poem that's written directly to the young boy, even though the young boy doesn't exist anymore. The poetic power of that forces you, the reader, to have to take on, in some ways, the feeling of both the Father as well as the Son. It makes for some compelling kind of reading. What we already mentioned it, but let's now write it down. What for you is the mood of this poem? Can you write that down at 2b? What is the mood of this poem? Do you have a sense that Jonson is angry? And if so, at who? Do you have a sense that Jonson is just really sad and grieved? Do you have a sense that Jonson is in some ways resentful of the fact that he had the 7 years with his boy and now doesn't get those years anymore? Let's jump to level 3 and how we relate to a title like this. Let's first of all begin at 3a with other titles. What is for you the classic movie about the loss of a child by a parent? And the emotional, powerful emotional sadness that's associated with the loss of the child by the parent. What is for you a song that talks about loss and death of the young? Right? Billy Joel, many years ago, wrote a famous song called Only the Good Die Young. And it became a very popular song, especially when we began to lose, especially in the popular media, some of our really important artists and musicians, and they died young. Of course, we will mention, when we meet the Romantics later in Senior English B, we will mention the fact that so many of our Romantics and great young poets, we think of Percy Bysshe Shelley, don't we? We think of Keats especially, die young, and how tragic it is that they die so young. Finally, let's go to 3b and how we relate personally to a text like this. Can you get any sense at all of what it's like when you're young to read a poem like this? See, there's been an argument that says you can read at 19, you can read a poem like this, but unless you've actually had a child already at 19 and lost that child, there is no way to really appreciate the pain that's being expressed here. You have to wait until you're a parent, and then and only then, when you have held your child for the first time, can you really appreciate the deepest sorrow of the loss of a child through death, and how unbelievably tragic that must feel to lose something that you care so much about, so deeply care about. This begs a number of personal questions, so let's ask them. Do you look forward to having a child of your own? Or does a poem like this suggest, you know what? There's a lot of pain associated with the potentiality of having my own child. I don't know that I want to gamble that. I don't know if I really want to put myself in a circumstance where I may have to go through this kind of pain. A second question. Do you think parents ever really get over the death or loss of a child? Do you think that Ben Jonson, through the writing of this poem, is able to somehow move beyond it, to get beyond it? Or are you more inclined to say, man, this is the kind of pain that's the deepest? Do you think the loss of a child is the deepest kind of pain? And if so, why? Why do you think that's the hardest? Maybe you consider it to be an unfair loss, the most unfair of losses. Well, there you go, an introduction to Ben Jonson's On My First Son. Thank you.